Hi, my name's Dr Hughes from Crime Psych. I'm a criminal psychologist and I run a business that enables me to bring knowledge and learning to everyone, not just those who are studying at schools, colleges and universities. And I do this by producing a range of blogs, vlogs and free online courses. But I do also run some slightly more in-depth courses which are both available face-to-face and online. You don't need any previous qualifications to learn with me, and there are a few different subjects available. So once you finish watching this video, why not head on over to my website and have a look to see if any of those interest you. This particular video is looking at whether criminals are born or made. I did write a blog about this a little while back, but I know that not everyone likes to read a blog. And as this question does come up time after time, I wanted to do a video as well to discuss it. There is a long-standing debate amongst psychologists, criminologists and sociologists on whether criminals are born or made. Some argue that when a person is born, it's already determined that they'll become a criminal. They suggest that some biological, physiological or personality traits have already been determined and these will influence that person towards criminality. Others argue that when a child is born, they're born as a tabula rasa, which means a blank slate. They argue that a child learns ways of behaving as they develop. They say that there are many different ways that a child can learn as they grow, and they form an idea about how they should behave in the world and in various different circumstances. As with many other areas of psychology, there are some limitations to each side of that argument. If a person is born criminal, they have no personal agency. It won't matter what type of upbringing or socio-economic status that they have. They'll inevitably go on to offend from that point of view. On the other hand, if a person is moulded to become an offender, their personality won't have any influence whatsoever. This argument also takes away some personal control over whether or not that person will become a criminal. If a person was made a criminal, an offender could argue that they're not culpable for their offending behaviour. They're simply a product of their own upbringing. One of the first biological theories to be established was formed in 1870. The idea that criminals had distinct features was first proposed by Lombroso in the 1870s. He became convinced that criminals are an earlier evolutionary version of humans. He decided that after many years of study, that you could tell a criminal by the shape of their face and the excessive length of their ape-like arms, according to him. Lombroso suggested that criminals had distinct features, such as large ears, an upturned nose. He suggested that thieves were more likely to have a flattened nose. Furthermore, he suggested that murderers are likely to have a hooked nose, a bit like the beak of a bird of prey. Although this early work was quickly discredited, it was the beginning of investigations into whether criminals had distinct biological features, such as different brain patterns to non-offenders. If this is to be believed, then surely everybody who had these physical features should be arrested, even if they haven't committed a crime yet. If you believe that Lombroso was right, then they would eventually go on to commit a crime. The field of biological explanations of crime was revolutionised in the 1980s because of the invention of brain scanning devices. Professor Rain was amongst the first to investigate brain patterns of violent murderers. Rain and his colleagues scanned the brains of hundreds and hundreds of murderers, and they found that they all had similar brain activation patterns. There was reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, and this is the area of the brain that controls emotional impulses and overaction of the amygdala in the brain, and that's the area that generates our emotions, would be more active. This means that the brains were more prone to rage and anger in violent murderers. They're also less able to control their behaviour. Rain found that all of those who had this specific brain activation pattern suffered childhood abuse. It's possible that as a result of the abuse, the brain became damaged, which results in more aggression. However, others have pointed out that some people suffer childhood abuse and never go on to offend or to become violent for that matter. A breakthrough came in 1993 with a family that was from the Netherlands, where all the men had a history of violence. 15 years of painstaking research revealed that they all lacked the same gene. This gene produces an enzyme called MAOA, which regulates the levels of neurotransmitters involved in impulse control. If you lack the MAOA gene, you're predisposed to violence. Whether the gene is triggered or not depends crucially on what happens to that person in childhood. So it seems that a genetic tendency towards violence, together with an abusive childhood, is a killer combination. Murderers, according to this, are both born and made. One psychological theory that is used to explain criminality is cognitive behavioural therapy. And that's based on the idea that the cognitive processes influence our thoughts and our emotions. Early psychologists such as Kohlberg and Piaget propose that we learn levels of moral development. And as we grow up, we learn what's acceptable or not acceptable through socialisation. Kohlberg proposed that children follow a pattern of evolving and learning the various levels of moral reasoning throughout their childhood. These stages are linked to the child's age and their ability to learn and their ability to reason. Other psychological theories of crime look at individual factors such as inadequate socialisation and negative early childhood experiences, as well as learned behaviours, personality and mental health disorders, which can all result in criminal thinking patterns. Psychological explanations of crime propose that a person's thought processes and characteristic ways of dealing with the world are better able to explain criminality than other theories. Psychodynamic or psychoanalytic theory is based on the work of Sigmund Freud. He suggested that we have three components which shape our personality. We have an id, an ego, and a superego within our psychological makeup. The id represents instinctual needs. The ego represents the understood social norms, and the superego is learned moral reasoning. According to psychodynamic theory, criminal and deviant behaviour are caused by imbalances between the id, the ego, and the superego. But it's almost impossible to measure and test each of these components to determine how they influence behaviour, as suggested by Freud. Learning theories have suggested that actions are determined largely by our life experiences. Learning theories suggest that we learn through what's known as conditioning. And this means that when we perform a particular behaviour, it can either bring about a positive or a negative response. A positive response after completing an action is a positive experience, meaning that behaviour would be likely to be repeated on the next occasion. Behaviour, though, might also bring about a negative response or consequence. This means that the person would have a negative experience after doing that behaviour, and that behaviour isn't likely to be repeated and will be avoided in the future. Other psychological theories suggest that a person's personality or some kind of psychiatric disorder might contribute to the likelihood of engaging in criminal activities. Theories of psychopathy are popularly used to describe more serious and violent criminal acts. However, the term psychopathy and psychopath isn't a medically recognised term. This personality type is more often referred to as antisocial personality disorder, and that's within the medical community what a person would be diagnosed with. Other personality types have also been suggested to be linked to criminal and deviant behaviour. Eysenck's trait personality theory suggests that we develop certain traits and we can be high or low on each of these individual traits. Eysenck found that soldiers' answers in a controlled study seemed to link naturally with one trait or the other, suggesting that there are several different personality traits which were being revealed by the soldiers' answers. Eysenck found that behaviour could be represented by 3 individual dimensions, and these are the introversion-extroversion, known as E, the neuroticism and stability, known as M, or the psychoticism, known as P. Extroverts, as we know, are sociable and they crave excitement and change and can become easily bored. They're more likely to take risks and to be thrill seekers. Whereas introverts, on the other hand, lie at the other end of this continuum scale, being very quiet and very reserved. They are already over-aroused by stimulation and they shun sensation and extra stimulation. Higher levels of extroversion have been linked to criminality in a few studies. In conclusion, then, it's clear that there are many theories that can be used to explain why somebody becomes a criminal. And each of these theories has value in understanding the behaviour and explores different aspects of behaviour, personality, the brain, the environment. But we are very complex creatures who have biological tendencies and different personalities. We all learn at different rates and in different ways and interact with our environment in different ways. Taken individually, these theories of why people commit crimes can't fully explain all types of crime and criminality. It is generally accepted amongst most academics now that the environment, our biological makeup and our psychological factors all play a part in criminal behaviour. Therefore, several theories of crime have got to be drawn on if we want to fully explain criminal and deviant behaviour. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I do hope that you've enjoyed it and more importantly, that you've learned something. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.